Welcome, everyone, to Inside Mount Washington Valley Education. This show was developed to present information on educational programming throughout Mount Washington Valley. My name is Bob Godomsky. I'm the Assistant Superintendent in SAU 9, and today's program is going to focus on the Common Core standards. I'd like to welcome our guests today on the show, Penny Kittle, Literacy Specialist and Teacher at Kennett High School, Amy Frechette, Principal of Pine Tree Elementary School, and Brian Hastings, Principal of Conway Elementary School. Welcome.
Thank you.
Penny, could you start us off just by talking a little bit about the Common Core standards? What are they? How were they developed? Those types of things.
So the Common Core standards, which are available at corestandards.org if you're online, are a comprehensive package of standards that were designed by a whole bunch of people, some of them involved with the College Board, because they're about college and career-ready expectations. So really looking at curriculum across literacy across K-12 and math and science across K-12 and saying, what do kids need to know to succeed in the workplace and succeed in college? And they were adopted right now by 46 states, so there are 4 states that don't intend to adopt them as far as we know. And they are then now sent out to bid to create assessments. So there are 2 companies working on assessments. New Hampshire's aligned with Smarter Balanced, and we have seen some evidence of what those are going to look like, but they're going to be rolled out in 2014, and we'll see what happens.
Now, what was some of the reasoning behind developing the Common Core standards? We had the New Hampshire state frameworks.
Right.
What was some of the reasoning behind developing the Common Core standard and adopting that in New Hampshire?
Well, I believe it was July of 2010 when the state board said that we would adopt the Common Core standards. And, you know, the big switch from No Child Left Behind, which was math and reading, to the idea that kids weren't writing well enough for college. Paul Tuff's book on How Children Succeed says that, you know, we're still up in the top 6 or 8 in the world in college access, but we have the highest college dropout rate in the world. So we've got so many kids that are starting college and either leaving because of economics or because they simply weren't prepared well enough to get there. Mm-hmm. And the Common Core standards put a huge emphasis on kids being independent and proficient in reading and writing, for one, the one that I know well enough. And the idea that students need to read primary source documents, take information, and write well in response to those is requiring a lot out of all of the content area people. And I think it was a move to say that a kid who's in California in grade 3 and dad gets moved to Massachusetts shouldn't face a whole different set of standards because he's been moved across the country. And that's what we've had, 50 different states with 50 different kinds of objectives and timelines, and so now we're trying to make all of those a little more similar.
Right, gaining that consistency.
Yeah.
And we even see that within this state, kids moving from Nashua to Bartlett to Hanover, all over the place, so the consistency would help there. Amy, could you talk a little bit about the Common Core standards and what are some of the direct effects on kids that you see and parents should notice?
Sure. After looking at the new state standards in depth, both myself and with staff and other professionals in SAU 9, we're really finding that the new standards are more rigorous, requiring a deeper, more thorough understanding of each skill. So they're less specific, but deeper in essence. And so the challenge for us as educators is to try to find a balance between these new standards, which are holding students to higher expectations academically, while also still, you know, finding the balance between that and the developmental expectations that we have for students. So what we would have typically expected a second grader to know at the middle of the year, you know, is now falling on the shoulders of end of first grade, you know, middle of first grade skill. So it's pushing that learning curve, and that for us is challenging. You know, we want all students to succeed at a very high rate with a deep understanding of what is expected, but at the same time understanding that they need to grow and develop as children as well.
Mm-hmm. The developmental aspect of this is really interesting. I was sitting in with some kindergarten teachers a week or 2 ago, and that was the discussion that they were having as to are some of the kindergarten children ready developmentally for some of the expectations that the Common Core is setting down. And it was a really nice discussion talking about the balance, just like you were talking about, with trying to push kids a little further and a little bit faster, but being sensitive to the developmental aspect as we go, so we don't push kids too far too early. Penny, how about the high school? What are some of the effects with the Common Core that we can see on
this
kids?
year I'm in charge of the literacy piece, and Jack Loind is in charge of the math science piece, and we have 14, we call them Common Core leaders at the high school, and we've chosen them from each of the content area departments, and then we gather and we're reading, one of the books we're reading is Pathways to the Common Core, which helps us see how those standards across K-12 look so that we know what kinds of experiences as these are implemented kids will have as they come in, but then also looking at all the pull-out samples, in particular the writing samples. Even a kid in woodworking is expected to write and annotate a report on something using research. So really getting to know what's expected of kids, and then Jack and I have freed up some time to go into classrooms. So I've been working in world cultures in 9th grade and have been planning with Jim Harrington to go into his auto advanced class, and the students are going to write with me as someone who knows very little about cars. They're going to use writing to explain to me what they're going to try to do to my car. So helping our content teachers who have been really focused on, the standards for the programs in Career Tech, for example, now look at literacy as something that helps kids learn the content, but it's also something they need to perform at these high levels in. So that work, it's ongoing. Probably the biggest thing we did, which was really valuable for all of us, was we did a baseline assessment using the Common Core standards and prompts for the kids. So while kneecaps were being administered to 11th graders, the 9th, 10th, and 12th graders at Kennett all took baseline writing assessments. And then on a teacher workshop day, all of the staff met in small groups and all graded together 20 writing samples. So the interesting thing is, how would you grade that piece, you, and we went around and talked to try to calibrate how are we evaluating student writing based on what we see and the rubrics that come. A rubric is just a list of the expectations for that kind of writing. So the teachers got to know what are the expectations really well. They got to look at student work and then talk with colleagues about, does this look like what I thought it did? One of our health teachers who hasn't had a lot of experience in evaluating writing simply because she's teaching a curriculum where there's short answers, not as many essays, is now much more confident about assigning essays because she sat really looking at the writing together. So we took all that data and evaluated as a staff, where are we weak, where do kids write the best, which grade levels and in which genres, and then now we're doing the same with math. Right. They took a math assessment, and Jack's presenting that on Friday. So.
And an important thing to remember is that, everybody owns a piece of these new standards. So it's no longer just third grade teacher teaching third grade curriculum. It's third grade teacher being paired with art teacher, music teacher, PE, just similarly with what Penny's saying about the high school Career Tech. Everybody owns a piece in a child's success as related to these new standards. So.
Right. Now, I know that we've been working hard on standards-based assessment. How does that affect the report card at the elementary school? Are there going to be some changes coming down?
Yeah, there are going to be some changes. Over the course of the last school year, a large team of teachers in SAU 9, so not just Conway area schools, but also Bartlett and Jackson, teamed together and had representation from every grade level and Unified Arts staff to develop a new report card. Because what we were finding and feeling really strongly about was that our old report card system didn't necessarily teach parents or inform parents about what items their child needs work in, what items, skills their student succeeds in. It wasn't really relevant to what we do on a daily basis. So the new report card will be standards-based, so pulling directly from the Common Core state standards for English language arts and math. And it will be really relevant to student learning. Biggest changes for parents to be aware of is that rather than seeing an overarching number grade, for math, for example, they'll see their children assessed on each standard as defined by the Common Core state standards at that particular grade level. So there will be a 4-point scale, 4 being exceeds standard for that grade level, 3 meets standards. So parents will really get an idea of, over the course of this school year, my child should be able to do everything listed on that report card. And then we'll really be able to see where the strengths and weaknesses are, rather than just getting, an 84 average in math. What does an 84 really tell you about what your child learned? They only learned 84% of the material?
So it's a
No.
more detailed assessment.
It's a more detailed assessment and more relevant to what it is that we teach every day.
Right. And what we'll be doing is the elementary report card, we're planning on rolling that out hopefully in September. And prior to that, the end of this year, over the summer, certainly early next year, we'll be having training sessions for parents to understand, and staff members will be producing those. We'll be sending information home on the newsletter. We'll be putting it on sau9.org, our website. So we'll be informing parents as we go as to how to really utilize that report card. Brian, could you talk a little bit about how are schools implementing the Common Core standards into the curriculum and actually into the classroom? What types of things are schools doing to make sure that that's a smooth transition?
Sure. I think it's important to know, Bob, that we've been working on standards-based instruction for a long time. It really isn't new for educators. Way back 10 to 12 years ago, we began working on GLEs, which were grade level expectations. What do we want students to know at each grade level? What are we looking for them to do? So the GLEs, grade level expectations, sort of morphed into state standards. And so this is sort of the third phase.
So it's not a wholesale change.
It's not, it's a change, but it's not all that new. I see it as sort of a continuum. I see it as a raising of the bar. And so educators are not, they're used to having conversations around the idea of, all right, what do we, 30 years ago, you were given a textbook, when I started teaching in 7th grade science, here's your textbook, have fun, we'll see you in June. It was pretty much based on what your skills were, and it's changed so much since that time, and there really is a lot of thought being put into what do we want students to know, and how can they demonstrate their knowledge, because we want them to be successful in college, in the workplace, and so forth, and that's what this is all about. So there's been ongoing work for a long time. Currently, there are a number of things going on at the schools across the district. There is a writing project that I know Penny's very involved with. The teachers in the elementary schools across the district are meeting, in fact, next Friday, this coming Friday, we'll be meeting at grade level to talk about Common Core and writing. Writing is a huge piece. I know Penny is, that's her area of expertise. So there's a collaborative effort across the SAU at each grade level to talk about what we want students to know. At each school there are PLCs, professional learning communities. These are collaborative efforts with educators that get together and talk about student work, again talking about what we want students to know. And the important piece of that is if we determine what we want them to know, the instructional piece of how we can deliver that in a way that's going to help all students is part of that conversation. So there's professional learning communities across the district. There's been a lot of summer work based on standardized, instruction. So there's a good effort, and I think the next piece of that effort is going to be geared towards the social studies of science. We've done a lot of work in math as well. So I would say that the plane, is off the runway and in the air, but, we've got a long way to go. And I also see it as an effort we're never going to be done. It's going to change based on new research and based on student outcomes, and update it as we go.
We've been doing a lot of professional development activities, and I know this year we've been concentrating basically on the writing, and we've seen great dividends with some wonderful activities going on in the classroom. When teachers get together on a teacher workshop day or PLCs, for those discussions about writing and the Common Core. What are some of the things that you're seeing them do in there that really benefit the transition of the Common Core?
Well, the last meeting I was at, the 6th grade teachers that got together, we have 3 text types in the Common Core in writing: informational writing, narrative or story writing, and argument. And we had the teachers gathered to look at the writing of students from all different buildings, and all of us together evaluating the writing and looking at what the grade level expectation in 6th grade was, and then saying, where are the gaps? You know, why are some of the students not writing as well as we had hoped? So we had gathered all kinds of resources from what we call mentor texts. So pieces of writing that are published in the world, maybe Cricket Magazine or something, that look very much like a strong informational text that would give vision to a kid. I want to write like that. I need to write organized like this, that a teacher can bring into the classroom and say, okay, let's all really read this carefully, which then piggybacks on the reading standards, which talk about students being able to read those, reread them, not only understand them, but be able to say, what does the text say, what does it not say, and what are the inferences that I'm making as a person reading this. So looking at the texts that are best going to move kids in those 3 kinds of text types. And then as we sat there planning that, you know, how much time do students have to confer with the teacher individually? And then if they go through that entire writing process and produce a terrific text, how come sometimes when they sit down to do it completely independently, they have such trouble?
Right.
Because one of our big, you know, challenges is, for example, on the SAT, you're given 25 minutes when you sit down, you read a quote and are asked a question, and you need to very quickly compose a thorough essay in order to get a good grade on the writing portion of the SAT. And so that on-demand, completely independent piece is what we're seeking for all kids. But you do that through giving them really rich experiences that are deeper in the writing process, that allow them to confer with other kids, confer with their teacher, continually read their piece and look for how to make it better so they can learn the skills to do it independently.
Right. Amy, can you talk a little bit about we're going from the state frameworks to the Common Core standards, and, you know, like Brian had mentioned, it's a continuum. It's not throwing everything out and starting over, but what are some of the differences with the state frameworks and move to the Common Core standards?
Yeah, we've all kind of touched upon that so far in the discussion, but really, each child is expected to have a deep understanding of each strand. And so what I mean by that is that not only are they supposed to be able to, you know, decode words, for example, you know, sound out words as they're reading along in kindergarten, 1st grade, but they have to synthesize what they're reading and apply it to other areas. And that's a shift for how we approach each task with a child, to know that not only are we looking for mastery on certain skills, but a real deep, rich understanding of how those skills apply to other things in life in general. You know, Penny was talking about sitting in on a 6th grade writing in-service professional development day that we had. Brian and I also sat in on some of the unified arts discussions, so with PE teachers or music teachers, and they're owning a piece of this too. You know, how does my game in phys ed assist our 2nd graders to have a deeper understanding about content, vocabulary for, you know, nonfiction or whatever the standard might be, and they're really thinking about, oh, I could try this with them, you know, or we could go over parts of the body and you know, how does that apply to other things that they're learning? So it's just a deep, rich understanding versus mastery of, you know, a hierarchy of skills.
Sorry. I think of the spiral. You know how the Common Core is built on repeated experiences and information. So you write opinions in kindergarten, which we'd never asked for. And one of my colleagues had them write toy reviews, which is a great place to get kindergartners. They have lots to say about the toys they buy or are given. So that idea that if they write opinions in kindergarten and then in 1st and then in 2nd, that you're building this skill that by the time they get to high school, they're very aware of counter arguments and counter claims and using evidence, and that it builds to the point where they're much more successful.
Yeah.
Rather than master it and then we
And then
put it
move on.
over there and we never visit
try
it
something
again.
else.
It's
Yeah.
spiraling.
And
Yeah.
the biggest thing is that it's no longer, oh, that they learned that in third grade.
Right.
You know, it's
Right.
they learn that from
All
kindergarten
connected.
all the way through. And that's a shift for people, you know,
Right.
or they're going to get to that in third grade. Or you have a parent say, you know, when do they learn to write in cursive? And you kind of look at them like, learn to write in cursive. We're going to write informational texts in kindergarten, and then we're going to, you know, teach it in first grade and second grade and third grade and on and on and on. So it's no longer compartmentalized by grade.
Right, right. And I think that, you know, you brought up a good point. If you're going to have an in-depth, very quality response in an SAT, when you read something and provide an answer to it, that just doesn't happen in the 9th, 10th, 11th grade. You've got to spiral from kindergarten all the way up, reading, writing, really applying those skills and developing those skills along the way. Brian, can you talk a little bit about the kneecaps? I know the kneecaps have tested the state frameworks, and we're changing to smarter balance assessment coming up in another year and a half. What's that transition looking like?
Sure. The kneecaps, we've been doing the kneecaps for a number of years. We test in the fall, and in 2013, fall of 13 will be the last year that we do the fall kneecap test. That's my understanding. And so following that, there will be a transition to a new pilot, and that will be in school year 2014-15. And it's my understanding that that's going to be a fall and a spring measure, which I think is good, rather than having just a fall measure.
Which is the smart, you'll hear NECAP, which is the New England assessment that we've been taking. You'll hear Smarter Balance, SBAM, which is our new assessment, school assessment coming down. So when you hear those, that's what that means. Smarter Balance assessment is the new school and state assessment.
Yeah, and absolutely. And the other thing that's going to change is that it's going to be, I believe it's going to be computer-based. So the technology piece, you know, in terms of writing, students are going to have to write word process their, you know, synthesized answers to questions, which will be different for
Well,
kids.
it's a huge shift because and the difference, I think it's important for parents to know that Smarter Balanced and Park are just two companies creating assessments so that there would be some competition. The federal government doled out $350 million between the two, and they're creating assessments, and 30 states are signed up to take Smarter Balanced. And then you have this about 16 that are, and some are signed up for both because they're not sure which one they want. But in the end, one of those companies will probably have an assessment for the entire country because I don't believe it will stay divided forever.
Right.
But the assessments they have, you can go to either website and see their released items. And they might be at the high school level 4 primary source documents that kids need to read and develop an argument in response. And there's been in existence a college learning assessment they give to sophomores, a select group across the country in all different colleges for years that exactly mimics that. So you have a report on the safety of a particular plane. You have all of these things, and then you create an argument for which plane we should buy. So you're actually not getting a prompt, but you're getting primary things to read and write a response. And so that shift, when you imagine a 6th grader sitting down and one of the volume expectations is 2 pages of single-spaced text written in one sitting on a computer. We have students who very rarely write on a computer. And so my concern with the testing is that we will be testing their ability to use technology as much as we're testing their ability to write. And so I would suggest that the state of New Hampshire should be bold and refuse to use the tests until they are proven to be valuable, because right now I'm not sure they're going to give us nuanced feedback of what kids can do in writing as much as they're going to tell us that we don't have enough technology. And the cost is enormous. Our school district right now is struggling over the budget to have enough technology. Anyone who has a child at the high school knows that our computers failed twice during midterm exams this week, entire server, so that kids, like my first block took the exam on laptops, third block took it on handwritten, pull out the old paper and pencils, and that makes a huge difference with high school students who are used to composing on a computer. And so when we see this, all of our students asked to compose on a computer, I think that is going to be such a shift for us, and it has an implementation ramp for all kids solving math problems on iPads. But I know all of us are saying, how many iPads do we need to get every kid to solve problems on an iPad? The cost is enormous, so I'm
Well, that's
concerned.
part of the preparation challenge too, is we're getting the released criteria for technology utilization from the state of New Hampshire. They're working through that and providing us, and we're trying to make sure that we're ready with it. I mean, you bring up a very good point. Not only can kids utilize the technology to bring forward their best skills, but are we going to have enough technology available?
That will work. I mean, imagine server bandwidth.
Right, and we're still wondering what the window will be, the testing window. Are we going to have 3 weeks to test all of the kids, or do we need to get them done in 3-4 days, a week, whatever? Which makes a big difference on whether we're bringing kids to the a computer lab or laptops or in the room. We need to make sure that we're ready for that as well.
Yeah, kind of two different realms of preparedness. One on our end in terms of hardware accessibility and use, ease of use, and the other is can elementary level students compose a piece of writing by word processing? I mean, are they prepared in terms of skill acquisition to be able to do that? So we're looking at those things, I think, from two different lenses.
Right. And I think that the challenge for us is that you have students who maybe compose beautiful narratives, handwritten, but if they can't reproduce that on the computer and are sent to a testing company who says these kids can't write, that may not be accurate.
Right.
And that's the part that is a challenge for all of us. The report card may say this student has exceeded the standards in writing, and then they take the actual test and can't perform as well as we want them to.
Right.
So we have a lot to work with.
So we've got a lot to do in the next couple of years. I know that getting back to one of the areas where I see the biggest benefit is increasingly we're preparing teachers to work together. We're no longer is it physical education in isolation, physics in isolation. Everybody has that writing piece that you're talking about of taking ownership, and not only being the expert in the area of chemistry, but also learning something about progressing the writing of kids as well.
Yeah, and another thing we're doing at the high school is bringing in nonfiction books, because nonfiction is a big shift in the Common Core that students should read at the high school level. Across the school day, 70% of the text should be nonfiction. So we have been purchasing books that can supplement biology and psychology, and that teachers can put those in the hands of kids because we have that reading break time. So kids are reading deeper in that content area in nonfiction, beyond the textbook.
Now we're encouraging kids and parents to read more, write more. I would assume that that's something that we will continue to practice from all ages, from kindergarten all the way up through.
Oh, absolutely.
Unfortunately, we're starting to run out of time. If you'd like to have more information on the specific Common Core standards for each grade level, if you look on SAU9.org, you'll find out information not only about SAU9, but you'll find out information on the Common Core standards, and you also have links on there to all of our area schools. So please visit SAU9.org for more information. If you'd like to see this show or any other shows that we've taped in the past, also on SAU9, there's a link inside Mount Washington Valley Education. You can watch the shows that we've done in the past. We're starting to run out of time. I'd like to thank Brian, Amy, Penny. Thank you for joining us today and filling us in on the Common Core standards. And we look forward to seeing you next time on Inside Mount Washington Valley Education.